If you're tired of throwing brown,
limp,
slimy,
moldy
food into the garbage can, you're not alone, and we're here to help.
Welcome to Thrifty Thursday, where we give you quick, easy tips to help you spend less and save more. Hi, I'm Larry.
And I'm Hope.
And welcome to Under the Median, where we talk about practical frugality every week.
Now, if you were to ask my family, any family member, what my number one pet peeve is, it would be
wasting food.
Yes, absolutely. Now, if you're in the same camp that I am, we actually have some really practical, easy tips for you today. Now, years ago, our family adopted a zero food waste policy. We vowed that we would throw out no more than 3% of all the food that came into the house. Now, we've done it for years. Even when we had all four boys at home, we were raising all four boys, we still threw out very, very little of the food that came into this house. Now, there are actually 4 strategic things that we did. And when we implemented these ideas, it immediately dropped our food waste by at least 80%. So those are the main tips that we're going to share with you today. So let's get started. So the first thing you need to do as soon as you get home from the grocery store is
know where to store the food and how to prioritize the use of it.
For instance, do you know which foods need to be stored in the refrigerator, what part of the refrigerator they need to be stored in, and which foods really actually do just as well, if not better, on your countertop? In addition to this, do you know how to lengthen the average shelf life of those foods? Well, if you're confused on any of those points, we actually have a free resource that we're happy to send to you. It is all about how to buy produce seasonally, and there are some charts in there that show you the top 15 fruits, top 15 vegetables, what the shelf life is, where to store them, and how to lengthen the shelf life. There's a link. You can request the free ebook, and the link is in the description of this video. Now, in addition to knowing where to store them, what else do they need to do?
So what you're going to do is you're going to use the shelf life of the food as your guide. So what you need to do is create a prioritized list of all your foods. And from that list, in order, you want to put the most perishable at the top. So Hope has her list for this week. So what's on the list?
This was this week's perishable food list. So we have zucchini, arugula, oranges, celery, carrots, beets, and onions. So you'll notice that onions, longest lasting food. The shortest shelf life foods on the list were arugula and zucchini. So you want to make sure that you have that list handy, because you're going to use that list, especially if you create a weekly menu plan, which you should be doing, then this is incredibly helpful in being able to do that.
Another example are bananas, oranges, and apples. Now, we all know that bananas should not be kept in the refrigerator. So that is something that you can put on your countertop or on your table. And that has a shorter shelf life than apples.
If you have those fruits in your home, then you're going to make sure you eat the bananas before you eat the oranges, and then leave the apples for later in the week. It's as simple as that. And honestly, that one tip actually helped us immensely in lowering the amount of food that we were throwing out on a weekly basis. Now, the next thing that we did.
Here's another example: salad mix, spinach, and cabbage.
Now, for some reason, like salad mix, when you get like different kinds of greens together, you have some greens that tend to go bad faster. So you end up with the whole salad mix kind of going bad far more quickly than if you have just spinach. And then, of course, cabbage is going to last a lot longer than either of those two things.
If you've stocked up on an overabundance of items, then you need to find out whether you can dehydrate those or whether you want to freeze them as a point of keeping them long term.
Now, there's nothing wrong with stocking up when you find a really, really great deal. But this oftentimes is like one of those things where our eyes are bigger than our stomach. Do you remember your parents always telling you that? Like when you have a plate full of food and you're like, I'm full. And so you go to the grocery store and you're trying to be healthy and like everything looks good, and you buy a whole bunch of one thing or another. If you've done that, no worries. Just make sure that you have a plan to freeze it or dehydrate it for later use.
Another good point is have a weekly clean out the refrigerator meal. That's where you go into the refrigerator, haul out everything that's in there, and start working on those items that there may be 1 or 2 servings left, and put them on the table and have it as a potpourri supper for you and your family.
Yeah, do you do this? Tell us in the comment section. And what do you call it? We call it a family potluck. This is probably a result of me being raised Baptist, because in the Baptist church, we had weekly potluck lunches after service. Can I get an amen from you? And so like everybody would bring something and put it out on long tables, and we would all eat way too much food. So using that as my example, we call it the family potluck. Everything goes on the table, and it's pick what you want to eat and grab it first.
Another thing that Hope does is she makes a kitchen sink vegetable soup. What is that?
It's where you find all the leftover veggies in the refrigerator and you put them all in the soup pot. So once a week, you wind up with this great pot of soup, and it's different every single week. It's based on whatever was left in the refrigerator. And once again, we want to know, it's called a number of different things. We call it kitchen sink vegetable soup. What do you call it when you clean out the fridge and make vegetable soup with whatever is left in there?
Another really good tip on this is to clearly label leftovers. Now, I'm a real stickler at this. We have what you call the remarkable markers, those markers that you can erase real easily, and we'll mark on each container the date that we're putting it in and what it is. That way we know how long it's been in there and what the item is.
You can also do this with masking tape, but one of the most important things about this point is to have a system where everybody knows the system. Everyone understands before you put something into the refrigerator, you make sure that you put whatever that item is on the label, and then you also put a date so that you know how long it's been in there. How many of us have been guilty of standing in front of our refrigerator and you find this nameless Tupperware, and you open it and you're like, I wonder how long that's been in there. Because believe it or not, like our memory fades faster than we think it's going to. And when you think back, when was it that I made that burrito casserole? It doesn't matter if it was 3 nights ago, 5 nights ago, 7 nights ago. It all kind of blurs into one like burrito thing in your mind. And you literally can't remember what day of the week it was that you made that on. And so having it labeled and dated, incredibly important. And everybody should know what the system is and what they need to put on.
And in addition to that, it helps to have a designated shelf or an area in your refrigerator for certain items. Now, I like to put our leftover oatmeal and cream of wheat on the top shelf on the right side. That way, when you're coming down in the morning, you're kind of in a fog from being a little tired. You know exactly where to go in the refrigerator. There's no mystery to it. Yeah. You can pull that item out, and it just makes it a lot more efficient.
Whereas the top shelf is designated for leftover hot breakfast foods for the next day, then the middle shelf, right underneath of that, is designated for everybody's lunches. The other thing that we tend to add to that label is someone's name. So if Larry is like claiming, he's like, I'm claiming these leftovers, these are mine for lunch tomorrow, he'll put what it is, the date, and Larry's lunch. And our son Daniel, who is 17 and leaves for work frequently, will do exactly the same thing. But they all know, second shelf, right-hand side, that's where you're going to find the leftovers that is designated for your lunch the next day. Just super handy. The other thing I will tell you from raising 4 boys is you need a shelf that is designated as the do not eat this shelf. How many times do you get into your refrigerator as a mom or a dad and you're convinced there is something in there that you set aside for supper that night, and your teenage son looks at you and says, oh,
I didn't know that wasn't meant to be eaten.
They've devoured it like as an after-school snack or something. And literally, your supper for that night is long gone. So it helps to have a shelf also where they know, don't touch this food.
You need to have a plan for your leftovers. So you need to, in advance, make a meal plan based on what you know you have in the refrigerator.
Now, the other thing you can do when it comes to planned leftovers is to have literally planned leftovers. You have made a double batch of something and you set half of it aside deliberately to have another full meal of it later in the week. The other thing you can do is designate, of course, as we mentioned, leftovers for lunches the following day.
Another thing Hope does that's so helpful is that she'll freeze meal-sized leftovers for future meals.
Now remember, all of these tips that we're giving you, these are the tips that have helped us reduce our family food waste by 80% of what we previously threw away in the garbage, wasting food and wasting money simultaneously. That's like a double whammy. Now, if you're wondering what this looks like in real life, how this sort of looks when we plan out a menu each week, we actually did a video on it. It's a zero food waste menu planning session where I show you exactly what was left over that were perishable foods in my refrigerator, and I plan an entire menu plan based on those foods. So that video is right over there. It'll give you some more great tips and advice to move toward zero food waste.